monthly, seasonal basis on how their business is performing. And typically these are distributed to the whole company, anyone who has a hand in product. So you, as a designer, would not be building these, would not be manipulating them, but you have access to them, to view them, to know your business really well before someone has to come tell it to you. So you can already start, moving forward. You don't have to wait for someone to explain things to you if you understand how to read the report yourself. Like I said, typically on a Monday morning, it's all about numbers for someone on the sales or the buying team. So they're gonna run the numbers and see what performed for them the past week, all the way down to the style level, but also at a more broad level, like classification or delivery based. So here, what I have up on the screen for you guys is an example of a Macy's selling report and the regions that they sell for. So you can see over here on the left side of the screen, it's listed out brick and mortar, so like the total stores versus Macy's.com. And then within brick and mortar, it's broken out by Northeast, North Central, Northwest, South, and Southwest. So you, as the designer, could look at this and say, okay, how did the South do in general? How are the warm weather styles performing versus the northern styles? And be able to understand a little bit better about how your business is performing. The first column is the this year sales. So when you see TY, that's going to mean this year. Plan is the plan that was set forth at the outset of the season, and that's what everyone's trying to achieve, no matter what. And it may be very in line with where last year falls, LY, or it may be more aggressive or less aggressive. But if a buyer is not hitting their plan, then they are not hitting their financial goals, which is not good for the company and not good for the specific buyer either from a, compensation standpoint. That's what they're judged on when they get to the reviews and any sort of bonuses that may exist, as well as what you may be judged on depending on what your compensation structure is like as a designer. So you obviously want to see this number being hit. Clearly, this was not a very great week for this specific account. The overall Omni, both brick and mortar and e-commerce together, was down 29% to plan. The this year number is less than the plan number, so it's down. It's also down on the LY number, nearly 50%, 47.9%. So right at a snapshot, you could look at this and say, ouch, that was a rough week. and be prepared that you're going to be having a conversation with the people who do deal with the customers and figure out, what it means about the product that you've delivered that you want to be already starting to correct as you start to move towards the next season. Does anyone have questions on this slide? Okay. Now, a little bit more specifically, getting into the product, this would be a classification selling. So in this specific instance, this is a collection business. There's a number of classifications that exist: dresses, knits, wovens, sweaters, jackets, vests, jumpsuits, leggings, pants, and skirts. Obviously, depending on what you're designing, if you're a shoe designer, this may look like boots, heels, sandals. If you're an accessories designer, jewelry, handbags, belts, it could just be broken out in different ways. But this is basically going to tell you how each of these classifications performed. So the first column here is the sales dollar amount and the sales units amount. Doesn't really mean very much unless you compare it to other numbers. It's just a dollar amount on the page. So what you would look at here is the last week AUR number, which tells you the retail price. AUR stands for average unit retail. This is the price that it actually went out the door at. And you as a designer could look at a certain classification and say, I know that all of our dresses cost $39.99, but the AUR out the door was $33.91, so there's a slight markdown happening on the product that's selling, but it's not a terrible difference in the business. Sell-through is, does anyone know what sell-through is in the room? It's the percent of business that you sold through the product the previous time period, so in this case, last week. So if you had 100 units and you sold 5 of them, you would have 5 into 100, 5% sell-through that week. So it's basically telling you how fast you're selling the product. And the higher the sell-through is, the better, because you want to get through the product really fast. You as a designer should want to see your product flying off the shelves, not having a chance to get old, not having a chance to get marked down. And this is often looked at both in a dollar standpoint and a unit standpoint. The thing that's different about dollar versus units is that dollars end up having markdowns taken into them, so it's not always apples to apples, whereas if you look at your unit sell-through, you can kind of compare the classes a little better. And you can look down the line and see which classifications are performing the best. In this case, the vests were performing very well that week. The next two columns are stock dollars and stock units. So this is a really important measure, I think, because you can also see not only which ones are selling through really fast, but which ones are selling better than the stock that they have in hand. Stock is the receipts that they've brought in the door for a given account, so you can only sell what you have on the floor. And if you're outpacing the sales that you have in stock, it means that that classification is performing very well. Or if this was down to the style level, that style is performing very well. So an example of a class here that's doing really well is sweaters, where it's 19% of your sales, but it's only 12% of your stock. To you as a designer, that would be a big red flag saying, okay, so for the April delivery, I didn't actually make that many sweaters for 2023. I'm going to need to start thinking about what I'm going to design for 2023 so that I can kind of push into the demand that exists out there for sweaters. And the last read on here is weeks of supply. So this is how many weeks you have on hand of a given product. As I already said, this was not a terribly great performing week because you have certain classifications like dresses where you have almost a year's worth of supply of dresses, 51 weeks of supply. That's a pretty sad account. But you would be able to look down the road and see who is performing well. We already talked about how sweaters is outpacing its stock, so that's at 20 weeks of supply. It's your best performing classification for this given week. Questions? Is this all kind of making sense? Yeah? Okay. So these are the key terms that I think are super important for you to understand and gonna make it so that when you walk in to an internship this summer, you're not like totally clueless when people start talking about the business. TY would equal this year, LY last year, PL plan. Sales to stock is the percentage of selling in sales to percentage of selling in stock. Sell-through would be the percent of stock sold, and then weeks of supply is how long it will take you to sell out of something. This slide will be live on the Blackboard. So if you guys want to take a look at it later, if you have questions you want to ask me about, feel free. But like I said, I think the most important thing you can do when you start somewhere is just to ask someone who does deal with the numbers and just ask them how they read the reports and try to familiarize yourself with it so that you don't have to wait for someone to tell you how your business was. You already know and make yourself self-sufficient, which I think will make you a strong designer. All right. Questions before we move forward? Okay, well, I would love to welcome our guest to you guys today. Meisha Brown is joining us. She is the Vice President of Sales for Department Stores in North America for Kering Eyewear. She is experienced buying, merchandising, and a wholesale sales professional in the luxury fashion industry, and previously worked at Barney's New York and Saks Fifth Avenue as an advocate for increased Black representation in recruitment, retention, as an advocate for increased Black representation in recruitment, retention, and executive leadership. Meisha serves as the founder and executive sponsor of the Kering Black Employer Resource Group. She holds a Master's of Arts in Luxury and Fashion Management with the Savannah College of Art and Design and a Bachelor of Science in Business Marketing from California State University, Long Beach. An Oakland, California native, she currently lives in Brooklyn with her husband and her 2 young daughters. Please join me in welcoming Meisha.
I feel very fancy up here.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. That sales report, I know we haven't started, but that is so important as a designer. I mean, that is like what I live and breathe. I'm not a designer, but I've been in this industry forever, and I just have to say, like, you have to know those numbers.
Yeah.
Even if you're a designer.
Yeah. And I feel like a lot of people get very intimidated by it, but just understanding how to read it is all that anyone asks of you, not trying to make it as a designer, not trying to manipulate it, but
No, not trying to
yeah.
just understand it,
Yeah.
because I don't know how many times, I mean, I will give you my whole background, but I have most experience on the buying side and working with designers, how frustrating it is to see a collection season after season and they're developing things that did not sell. And it's like, did you look at the selling? That, one-armed jacket did not sell. Please stop making it.
Yeah.
And I know designers are creative and it's about their vision, but they also need to they're running a business. So you have to remember that. And those numbers will tell you if your business is working or not.
Yeah. Great, thank you. Wondering if you could kick off by just talking a little bit more about your path and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah. So I started my job as the executive trainee at Saks Fifth Avenue in their corporate office here in New York. And that is when I was basically thrust into all of those numbers very, very quickly. I was not as lucky as you guys to go to a school that focused on fashion and business. I didn't learn any of that in my degree. I went to Cal State Long Beach. I majored in business marketing. So I didn't learn any of that. I didn't know what TY meant, LY meant, none of that. So my executive trainee program was really about learning all that on the job very quickly, which I have to say I cried. I remember crying to my mother. I'm never going to get this. I don't get it. I didn't realize how many numbers were involved in buying. I, like many people, thought that I would be traveling the world and going to fashion shows and have an unlimited wallet and buy whatever I wanted, which is 1,000% not the case. It is mostly looking at those Excel spreadsheets and those numbers. So I started off there. It was like a 9-month program where I went through stores, I went through planning, and then in the buying office. So I graduated from that program and started as an assistant buyer in the contemporary ready-to-wear office. I was there for about 3-4 years, actually. And then I left there and took a role as an associate buyer with Barney's New York, RIP, in their co-op office, which was their contemporary business, which I'm sure you all are probably too young to even know about. But it was a big part of their business. We had about 32 stores. So I was the denim buyer for many, many, many years, 7 years, actually. So I worked specifically in denim. I bought for all of the Barney's and the co-op stores. I learned a ton about just running a business. And after that, I moved on to accessories, and I moved into handbags. Worked there, I don't even know how many years, moved up as the buying director, so I was over pretty much all accessories, handbags, soft accessories, everything kind of except jewelry. And then, unfortunately, it was very bittersweet at the end. Barney's did go out of business. I guess it's been 3 years now, if I can remember correctly. So
it was a sign the pandemic was coming when that happened, I think.
It was, but they had a lot of other issues. So. But it was a great experience for sure. I learned a lot about working with new and up-and-coming designers, working with product. Although they eventually became a very numbers-focused business, when I started there, it was all about product and all about finding what was new and new designers, new products, and really being at the forefront, which was actually amazing. And then I left there and kind of did some soul searching. I had actually started to work on my my master's in luxury fashion management because I kind of didn't know what I wanted to do next. I knew I didn't want to do buying anymore. I'd done it for so long. And then this opportunity presented itself as the vice president of sales for Caring Eyewear. So I was overseeing eyewear as part of accessories at Barney's, so I already kind of knew the team. I was familiar with eyewear and the brand. So I took a little bit of a break and then took this role, which has been amazing. So now I'm on the flip side. I'm on the sales side, which I never really thought I would be interested in doing. But I actually love it. It's great. It still deals with products, still running a business, but just from the opposite side of it.
Yeah.
And I've been doing that for the past 2 years now, a little over 2 years.
Awesome. What does a typical week look like for you in your role?
Okay, so my title is a little misleading because sales, when I think of sales, I think of like a used car salesman or like cold calling, like, hey, do you want to buy these Gucci sunglasses? That is not what I do. Selling Gucci sunglasses sell themselves. It's really about developing a business. So I work with all the major department stores and the boutiques, so Saks, Nordstrom, Neiman's, Bloomingdale's, Intermix, Holt Renfrew in Canada, a bunch of other smaller boutiques, and really developing their business and thinking of strategies on how to really push their business with us as partners. Thinking of strategies on how to push the brands. So, right now we're developing, Gucci is known, everyone knows the Gucci sunglass, but we also have Alexander McQueen, we actually oversee Chloe as well, Bottega, Balenciaga, all of these brands, when it comes to eyewear, have a much smaller footprint than like a Gucci. So thinking about ways to really develop and grow those businesses, and how can we grow them even bigger in the footprint that we have. So, I'm not necessarily selling to new accounts. It's just really developing them within the accounts that we have. A lot of business development, forecasting for units for production. So working very closely with planning to say, oh, this sunglass we developed for spring 2023, how many units do you want? It's a shot in the dark, I don't know, but I'll do analysis. I'll look at those selling reports. I'll say, well, we had a similar style in spring, summer 21. It did really well. It had a 70% sell-through. We sold 100 units. Let's bump this one to 200. I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know, but I have analysis. So I really think about it and look at the numbers. Managing a team. I have a team of 5 salespeople. So managing them to work with their accounts and sort of sharing out the strategies, the bigger picture strategies. Partnering with accounts. This business is all about relationships. On every side that I've been with, every role that I've been with, it's really about relationships. This industry is small, and you see people again. So you never want to burn your bridges, and you have to have some tough conversations, but you have to learn how to do that in a way that is effective, but also maintaining those relationships. So I do a lot of that on a day-to-day. So it's funny, I'm not really selling anything on a regular basis.
I think it maybe depends on where you're in sales, because the better your brand, the easier it is to just kind of cultivate, versus if you're selling something that has no label on it,
No,
you're out
absolutely.
hawking a little bit.
Then you really got to get those sales skills going and figure out, okay, how am I selling this no brand, shoe or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. And then it's all about price. What does an entry-level job look like on your team?
So entry-level job for me is a account executive, a sales account executive. So that person, sorry, my throat, I was going to cough for a second. Sorry, I'm okay. Not COVID, promise. I tested this morning. A sales account executive is an entry or junior account executive, we call it, even depending on the company. And so that person is responsible for the actual selling, right? So they work with different department store accounts, and they develop the relationship and they sell the product. So we have 4 collections a year. So every market, the team, puts the collection together, and they go out and they work with their department store partners and they sell the product. So requires a lot of romancing the product, explaining the product. What is the collection about? How does it link back to the bigger brand? What is the cost? What is the retail? What is the margin? What do you suggest I buy? What has been the best seller for you? So that's where the sales piece comes in, for sure. Analyzing reports. Those reports, like I said, I can't say it enough. My team is out there looking at those reports. Okay, so I'm the account executive for Nordstrom. Nordstrom sells, basic glasses with a big logo. So I'm looking for every basic sunglass with a big logo to sell to my Nordstrom partner. So that's, in addition to many, many other things. There's a lot of back of house things, sales operations things that my team does, working with shipping, making sure their shipments are going out. Okay, I've gotten the order in, now I have to make sure the shipment goes out on time, or my account's gonna cancel it.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of that as well, working with planning, again, forecasting, so they forecast as well as I do. Working with planning on availability. My account wants to reorder something. What's the availability on that style? Okay, it's April, the style's not coming until July. The account's not gonna want it then. When can we get it to them sooner? So really working on all sides of the business to push the shipments out and therefore get the sales.
Yeah, that's great. Have you identified any key qualities that make someone a specifically hireable candidate?
Yeah, so it's funny, now that I've been on the sales side for 2 years, the qualities that I realize I need are a little bit different than someone who's a buyer. Because I've hired many buyers, not as many salespeople. So from the
You can
sales
comment on
side,
both.
yeah.
you
So,
want.
okay, so from the sales side, I've realized not only do you have to know the numbers, meaning our internal wholesale numbers, but also those reports that you were showing on the screen, because you need to be able to read the numbers that your account is sending to you. But you also have to have, and I say this in a way I don't want to scare anyone, like a dynamic personality. And everyone's dynamic personality is different, right? Like you just can't be quiet and reserved, because you're actually selling product and you're building a relationship, and it's your job to actually do that. So this department store is the client. So you really have to go to them and kind of wine and dine them, you know, for lack of a better term. You really have to woo them. You really have to foster that relationship. And I think I've realized you need that more in a sales role specifically.
Mm-hmm.
Now on the buying side, you need more of the numbers. You're running an open to buy. You're responsible for the budget, the inventory, the sales impact, managing all of that. So it is really important that you know those numbers backwards and forwards, margin, markdown assistance.
Yeah.
All of that is super important on the buying side. I use a lot more numbers on the buying side than I use on the sales side, to be honest. I am thankful that I use that, because now it helps me on this side.
Yeah, I can imagine.
What else? Someone who is really resourceful, like you were saying that earlier in the introduction. You want someone who can, there's obviously a learning curve for anyone in a new job, and there's obviously onboarding that is expected, but you want someone who can kind of very quickly learn and use their resources, right? So like you come onto a new job, you're learning a lot. You're learning different reports, different functions, you're learning how to do your job. So the last thing I think your boss wants is for you to come to them every second with another question. When I'd say after a few weeks, you can use other resources. You use other team members, maybe use the planning team, maybe you use your, your design counterparts, maybe you use the store, whatever it is, you're using your resources to kind of figure out your role.
Yeah.
So I think being resourceful is really great, a really great skill set to have that I don't think always people think about when they're interviewing.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, we all just read the State of the Fashion 2022 that McKinsey puts out every year, and there was a big talk about talent crunch being an issue. Is that something that you're feeling?
Oh my God, yes.
Yeah.
So I have a team, like I said, of 5 people, and it's April, right? In the past 3 months, I lost 3 people, 3 of the 5.
Wow.
And honestly they promised me it wasn't me. They said I was a good boss. It's just this whole great resignation thing.
Yeah.
And they went to, for the first time in my career experience, they went to non-fashion companies.
Wow.
They went to, one girl went to Amex, someone went to Salesforce, and someone went to DoorDash.
Wow.
So these are, I can't compete. I'm used to competing with fashion companies.
Yeah.
I'm not used to competing with non-fashion companies. Thank goodness I was able to replace everyone, but it is definitely real. I mean, I think just coming out of this pandemic, people are rethinking everything.
Life choices.
Life choices, what they want to do, where they can live, right?
Yeah.
Because the fashion industry is still very much in person.
Right.
I go in twice a week right now, but I'm sure my company would love for us to go in 5 days a week again.
Yeah.
Whereas tech companies were already set up to be at least hybrid.
Yeah.
So I think, I'm hoping that it's slowed down. I mean, the last person that resigned was like beginning of this year, so fingers crossed, but I
Yeah.
think every industry is really experiencing it.
Some shifts. And do you feel like your company is doing enough to kind of retain people?
I do, actually.
Yeah.
I will say that they are really, so my company the headquarters is based in Italy, and what I've learned is the culture of Italy is very loyal to your company. It's not like here in America, we're like in and out. Like,
Yeah.
oh, I was here a year, I'm leaving, I'm going here for another year. That's just kind of, we have a lot of opportunities. More so than I think Italy specifically, not that there are none, but I think just more. And so because of that, because that's their, how they operate culturally. They are very big on trying to keep people, which is great. It's a great feeling.
Yeah.
If you are a good employee and they really value you, they do what they can to try to keep you, which is, it's really appreciated.
Yeah.
It doesn't always work, but.
Yeah. So your first job out of school was the training program at Saks. How did you get that job?
Okay, so like I said, I went to school for business marketing. I went to Long Beach State. Since I was in high school, I knew I wanted to be a buyer. I didn't even know what a buyer did, but I was like, I want to be a buyer.
Sounds great.
So at that point, which is going to date me because I don't even know if they have all these programs anymore, there were buyer training programs. So Saks had one, Macy's had one, The Gap had one. I think those were
Lord and Taylor, maybe.
Yeah, Lord and Taylor.
Yeah.
But I'm from the West Coast, so I didn't really even know what Lord and Taylor was, honestly.
Yeah.
Levi's had one. So most of these were San Francisco based, and I'm from the Bay Area. So I applied to all of those programs, and I didn't get into one. So I graduated college, and I was like, well, what am I going to do? And so it was kind of this weird time where they had these training programs, but they still wanted you to have retail store experience, which is quite interesting because I think that's a bit of an antiquated thought process. I think it's great to have retail store experience, but I don't think you need it to be a good designer or buyer or sales, like wholesale sales.
Yeah.
It's just a very different job. But a lot of companies at that point were still like, oh, well, have you worked in the retail store? And I'm like, no, but I went to college. I have this 4-year degree. So I said, you know what? I didn't get any of these programs. I'm going to move home, and I'm going to get a part-time retail sales job. And I said, I'll do it at Saks because I want to get into their program. And I don't know, it's a shot in the dark, but what else do I have to lose?
And in the meantime, you get a good discount.
Get a good discount. I got hired as Christmas help in September of, I don't even know what year. If I remembered, I probably wouldn't tell you, but some year. And I was selling $100 Christmas ornaments in September. And I remember I wanted to die. I was like, what am I doing with my life? I told my mother, I said, I feel like I wasted your money. I went to college, and I'm selling Christmas ornaments in September. And I ended up basically doing the job and kind of telling everyone at that Saks what I wanted to do. Oh, I just graduated. I really want to be a buyer. There's a buyer training program at Saks. Telling people that I didn't even, other salespeople, back stockroom people. And I ended up telling HR. And they said, you know what, we'll put in a good word for you. The head of HR at the store said, I'll put in a good word for you. And I was like, that's great. But honestly, I thought they're all the way in New York. They have, at that point, Saks had 60-something stores. I'm like, I'm sure every sales associate is trying to get this job. She put in a good word for me. I applied the next year, and I got in.
Oh, that's great.
And I think, quite honestly, there was nothing different about my application besides that I worked in selling Christmas ornaments, which I don't know how much that helped. I think the dedication, because they knew it was my second time applying, and the relationship,
Yeah.
quite honestly. I think that's
valuable.
The person in HR really liked me. I showed interest. I did a good job at selling Christmas ornaments. And she's like, I'll put in a good word for you, and it worked.
Yeah. That's great. I actually always do tell people that as advice. If you are having a hard time getting that job that you really think you want, it's a really good idea to get some retail store floor experience, because I'm sure you were able to apply some of that once you got on the
I was able to
buying
apply it
track.
for sure. Just
Yeah.
knowing what the customer is and learning luxury, right? That was my first insight into luxury.
Yeah.
So definitely learning on the floor, who this customer is, what they look for, what their needs are, was definitely absolutely important and helped me.
Yeah.
For sure.
I could see that. And so at a certain point, you went back for your master's.
Yes.
And how did you make that decision, and did you find it worthwhile in the end?
So the writing was on the wall with Barney's. So I was at Barney's for 12 years. So it was a completely different company, and the writing was on the wall. And this was, before the pandemic. And so I was like, I got to do something. I got to do something else. And actually, I had decided, you know what? Maybe I want to go into teaching fashion at the college level. And I knew in order to do that, I needed to get a master's. And so I said, no time like the present. I had gone on a family vacation, actually, to Savannah. And I ran into the Savannah College of Art and Design. And I'm like, oh, this is such a beautiful school. I'd heard of it, but I didn't know much about it. And I happened to see that they had an online luxury fashion management master's program. And I said, well, I mean, I don't live here, but that's what I need. I need to keep my job and still go to school, and online would be great.
Yeah.
So I looked more into the program, and I decided right after having my second daughter, I said, you know what, I might as well do it. And I will say it was the hardest working time I've ever had in terms of just my schedule. I had 2 little kids, a full-time job, and I was doing online school.
Wow.
Anywhere between 9 p.m. and midnight or later on the week, every day, honestly.
Wow. It's impressive.
Reading, and I'm
Very
sure,
impressive.
as you guys know, online school is much harder than in-person school. I would have much rather sat in a class like this and
It's much more engaging and
ask questions
yeah.
and, you know, be able to understand things, and reading pages and pages of books online that I was like, I don't even understand this.
Yeah.
And this is after I'd been in the industry for many years. There were things I didn't understand. I'm like, I don't know, I've never done this. I actually, you guys would probably know, I took a class that was about like tech design, and we had to design a jean from start to finish.
Wow.
Although I was a denim buyer for years, I never designed a jean. So I had to
Yeah.
look up the cost of rivets
Oh
and
my gosh.
source material and measurements, and I was in a production facility. I was so outside of my wheelhouse in that class, but I was doing that at night while I'm going to work full time.
Wow.
So I decided to do it. It was a 1-year program. It took me 3 years, which I planned for. I knew I couldn't do it in a year. I basically took 1 class per, they were on a quarter system.
Wow.
So I committed to it. It took me 3 years, and I finished.
That's great.
So it was great. It was, and I'm glad your second question was, am I glad I did it? I'm glad I did it because I think it really helped me with this role
Yeah.
in terms of looking at things from a more global perspective. And also, having been at Barney's for 12 years, while I'm proud of that, you do get kind of stuck into like a Barney's bubble, you know, and like you realize, okay, there are many other retailers, many other businesses, many other ways to do things besides the Barney's way.
Yeah.
So I think taking it to the classroom, I really was able to open it opened my eyes to what the world was doing, not just Barney's.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's great. Why do you feel like you're passionate about what you do?
So I actually realized with this job, more so than my time with Barney's, which is going to sound crazy, that I actually love fashion. When I was at Barney's, I kind of hated it a little bit because I was so in it. It consumed me. It was my job, Monday through Friday, 9 to whatever, to know fashion. And it took the fun out of it a little bit, or a lot of it. And while I did get to travel, and I went to Europe 4 times a year, and I went to beautiful showrooms, and I went to like every fashion show imaginable, when you make it work, it's work. You know, I'm not going to say it's not great, but it's work. So it did take the fun out of it a little bit to me.
Yeah.
And so now in this role, I kind of was thinking when I was going through that transition, what if I don't like fashion? What if I don't care anymore? And now in this role, I'm like, no, I actually love it because I'm on the sales side and I'm not in a buying office, and it's just different. It's a different side of the business. And so now I can enjoy it on my own time and not so much, I don't have to be so entrenched in it in this job.
Yeah.
So I definitely love the fashion side. I actually love the numbers, and I'll be honest, I did not in the beginning.
Yeah.
Now, when you were showing that spreadsheet, I'm sitting there, I'm like, why am I excited about this? My husband laughs at me. Like, I do Excel spreadsheets.
Especially that sales report.
I know, that one was not great. But I do Excel spreadsheets now for things that I don't need to, like
Yeah.
grocery lists or Excel. He's like, what is wrong with you? I'm like, this is what I know, Excel spreadsheets.
Yeah.
And so I've just learned to love it. And I actually really do love developing talent. So I have a team that I manage, and I've always had, for the past, I don't know how many years, I've always managed someone. And I really do love managing and developing people and guiding them and seeing them grow. It's really fulfilling.
Yeah.
So I think
Well,
those
that's
are probably the
wonderful.
things I love the most.
Probably makes you be a great boss.
Yeah, I think so, but don't ask my team.
Kind of leads into the next question. So you began, I don't know if by yourself or with others, but the Caring Black Employee Resource Group. And just wondering how you got it started and,
Yeah.
any advice you can share for advocating for yourself and for diversity in a larger company.
Yeah. So it was an interesting time. I started this job 3 weeks before the pandemic. So it was very interesting onboarding. And then about,
Wow.
I don't know, less than 6 months after that, everything happened in the summer of 2020 with George Floyd. And so the opportunity presented itself, or the company, I should say, presented the opportunity for me to lead the D&I committee. So they created these D&I committees by house. So Kering had one, Gucci had one, Bottega,
Oh, wow.
Balenciaga. And they were already planning to do it, but they basically fast-tracked it because of the craziness in the world. And through that opportunity, although the D&I committee was great, and I learned a ton, I realized that, and I knew this before, but my true passion was really working with and developing opportunities for Black talent specifically, because I've been in this industry for 18 years, and quite honestly, there's not enough diversity at all, and there's not enough diversity as it relates to Black people in general. So for me, that was really my passion. I found that I was really interested in figuring it out. So as the lead for the D&I committee, I spoke to the head of D&I in Paris, and I said, look, I want to create an ERG. Why don't ERGs exist? Because Gucci had one, but in terms of caring overall, there wasn't one. I said, I really want to create one for the Black employees. And she said, we do have ERGs on the list of things that we're going to do, but we just basically haven't gotten to it yet. And she said, but because you're interested, I'm happy to support you in developing one. So that was 2 years ago. And basically, after many conversations, many levels of sign-off, a lot of different communication with the different stakeholders in the company, we were able to officially have a soft launch end of last year, and then really seek out a committee and launch it this first quarter of the year, which has been amazing. So
Wow.
now I have a committee established. We have our first meeting set for May. We have different initiatives that we're going to work on, and I'm really proud of it. I mean, it was 2 years in the making.
Wow.
But for me, it's really important. When I looked around Kering and I started to learn the organization, and while we have, we do have Black employees, a lot of them are sitting at more entry-level positions. And I'm wondering, we live in New York, it's so diverse here. Most of our corporate offices are based in New York. To me, it doesn't make sense that there's not more Black talent at senior levels. There are not more women at senior levels. There's not, more LGBTQ plus at senior levels. It's still shocking to me, but I'm hoping that this is a small part that I can do to help to improve the company.
Yeah, that's great. What do you feel like have been the biggest challenges to increasing Black representation in the industry?
So I think when the conversations I've had with HR is they really want to support it and they really want to do it, but I don't think they know where to start.
Uh-huh.
So sometimes they're like, well, yeah, we definitely want to hire more senior leaders that identify as Black, but they won't say this, but I think they're kind of like, well, where are they? So I think part of it is figuring out new recruitment strategies, thinking outside of the box, not going back to the same talent pool, whether it's working with HBCUs or working with outside third-party companies to help us source more Black talent. So I think that's the biggest challenge that I've heard from an HR. Now, I'm not in HR, so I can only do so much, but that's what I've heard, and I understand it to an extent.
Yeah.
And I'm always advocating if there's an open position and I know someone who is Black identifying that fits the role, because it can't just be because they're Black, obviously, they need to fit the role. I'm always, putting forward a resume, but it takes time. It's like moving a mountain, honestly.
Yeah, that's great. So you started this job 3 weeks before COVID started, but I don't know if you can talk about any ways that COVID has kind of fundamentally changed the company and, silver linings that maybe have come out of this whole
Silver lining
crazy
is
period.
Hybrid work.
Yeah.
Hybrid work. I am a huge advocate of work-life balance. I obviously have 2 kids, so I really need that in my life and always did need it. And funny, when I was working at Barney's, I was one of the first people to push forth working from home once a month, which was huge for the company.
Yeah.
I had to get all these people to sign off on it. It was like such an ordeal. And now I look back and I laugh. I'm like, oh my God, just to get 1 day a month was crazy.
Yeah.
So hybrid work is super important. I'm a firm believer in, if I'm hiring you, I'm trusting you to do your job. I don't need to see you sitting at your desk working away all day long. And believe me, I will know if you're not doing your job.
Yeah, it's pretty obvious.
Yeah, it will come out for sure. So just having that flexibility of like, you want an office. I don't want to work from home 100% remote. My life isn't set up for that either. But I like the flexibility of going in twice a week. I have an office. I see my team.
Yeah.
And then the other days I can work from home in my pajamas and be just as effective, if not more effective.
Yeah.
So hybrid work, I think, for the fashion industry is a huge plus. The fashion industry is a bit antiquated in that they never had that before. No one I know that worked in this industry had, like work from home option, hybrid option. It's very much like you're in your desk, you're in your office, you're in the showroom. As designers, you may not have that much flexibility because you're actually touching product and creating things, and you probably don't have all those materials at home. So some job functions, just if you're sales in the store, like you have to go in. I get that. But if I'm sitting at my computer going over Excel spreadsheets for hours, I can do that at home.
Yeah. Yeah. What was the hardest part about being a leader during this time?
Oh God, so much. So just because I started the rules 3 weeks before. So
Yeah. So
onboarding,
not only did
I'm
you not
learning a
know
new
people, but you
job.
didn't get to see them.
I'm training people, and I literally am in my room.
Yeah.
Or in my front room. So
Yeah.
that was definitely hard. And also learning how to be a manager. So even now, 2 years in, like I said, we go in twice a week, but learning how to manage people without seeing them every day is a bit of a shift and something you have to figure out, especially when you're onboarding someone. You have new people start, and you kind of can forget about them if they're not, right there in the office with you.
Right.
And so just reminding myself, okay, this person is like day 3. I don't even know what they're doing right now. And I get busy. I have meetings all day long. I'm, like clients I have to take care of, and I'm like, I have this new person. And, sometimes as a new person, you don't always want to be like, hey, hello, like I need something to do. But the first week or so, you kind of do. You need a lot of hand holding.
Yeah.
So I think that was challenging. And just figuring out, like, I think we seamlessly moved into remote work because, again, everything's on your computer. But, like, figuring out the dynamic of, like, video calls. Like, I finally told my team, I don't need to look at you all day. Like, I know you're there, so you can turn your camera off. But I know, to me, younger generations, you guys are used to it. You FaceTime all the time. I always tell my sister, I'm like, why are you FaceTiming me? I don't need to see you. But that's just like, it's different. So they're like turning their camera on. I'm like, guys, I'm not turning my camera on. I'm like, I'm in my pajamas. I have 2 kids screaming behind me, but I'm here.
Yeah.
So figuring out those dynamics was a little tricky.
Yeah, a little back and forth. I could see that for sure. What do you feel like is one of the biggest challenges facing your industry as a whole?
I still do think the pandemic is really affecting us. And even though I guess it's technically after the pandemic, I don't know when the pandemic officially ends.
I don't know who's going to call that. I'm not sure whose job that is.
I don't know either. But I will say,
I'd like to call them and ask.
After effect is still plaguing us a bit. Like the ups and downs of it all, right? There's still stores in Canada that have closed in the past month because of the pandemic.
Yeah.
So we're still dealing with that, although in America it's been pretty consistent, but there are still some stores that are like, oh, well, the numbers are up, so now we're closed. So that still is affecting business. Inflation now. So we're talking about price increases, and none of our accounts want to deal with price increases. And they're sort of off cadence, because we typically would do them at the beginning of the year, but with the cost of everything going up, we're forced to say, sorry, we got to increase the prices of everything, which is inflating their inventory levels. So that sales to stock is going to be even more out of whack.
Right.
So that's really challenging us right now.
Yeah.
And then something like not related, well, I mean, everything is related to the pandemic, but not necessarily related to the pandemic, I will say is this industry can be a bit traditional, and antiquated. So doing things a different way. We all know e-commerce is the way to go. We all know digital. This is a digital world now. But I'm still surprised to see how some department stores are doing things the old way. And like, how can we push the needle and move them forward to do things in a new and innovative way?
Yeah.
Versus the same old traditional things that they've been doing for years and years and years. I quite honestly think that stores are becoming more of like showrooms in a way.
Yeah.
I don't know how many times I've gone into a store and I look at something and I'm like, oh, that's cute, and then I go home and buy it online.
Yeah.
I don't know why, I just do.
Yeah. It percolates and then you're like, oh, yeah, I really want that.
I don't know, the last time I actually bought something physically in a store, it's rare.
Yeah.
Carry a bag home, it sounds crazy, but like, I'm not doing all that.
Yeah.
I actually like getting a shipment in the mail. It's exciting.
It's like a present. Yeah.
So I think that is still a challenge for this industry, is moving that mark to be more, even more omni than they already are.
Uh-huh. Yeah, that makes sense. Is Caring Eyewear doing anything to be more sustainable?
Yeah. So Caring is big on sustainability.
Oh, that's great.
And really creating innovative ways to be more sustainable. So as it relates to Caring Eyewear, it's really about working with our brands to create sustainable materials. So we really work with plastic and metal. I mean, that's what most glasses are made of. So we work with, in some cases, bioacetate, which is more biodegradable than just your regular plastic.
Yeah.
So Gucci is actually, it's brand by brand, right? Every brand is different. Gucci is usually the trailblazer in almost everything. So Gucci next month actually is coming out with a sustainable eyewear capsule.
Wow.
So the glasses are all bioacetate and mineral lenses. So doing more things like that to really improve our sustainability footprint,
Yeah.
as much as possible. I mean, it's a long way to go. There's a lot to be done, and there's a lot more that could be done. But I think little things like that are helping to move the mark.
That's great. What do you feel like is the hardest part about your role in sales?
I think the hardest part is sometimes thinking of ways to really work with your department store partners to get them to, for lack of a better term, do what you want them to do, right? Like, I want you to partner with me on this new idea. I want you to partner with me on buying into this brand or this style. And a lot of times, depending on the department store and their personality, they're just like, no.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, okay, well, so finding that balance, accepting their no, but then also figuring out how can you leverage something else? How can you circle back to them and maybe present it in a different way?
Yeah.
So that's probably the hardest part, but it's actually the part I enjoy the most. That's
Yeah.
the strategy part that I was talking about.
It's a little bit of both.
Figuring that out, figuring out how to everybody has like a best way to get to them, and sometimes it's just about the buyer personality, honestly.
Figuring that
Like
out.
this buyer does not like when I call them on Monday morning with blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna call them on Friday afternoon.
Yeah.
But that's just, you kind of learn that as you go a little bit, and you develop relationships and think about different strategies.
Yeah, that's great. My last question for you would be what would you recommend as your number one piece of advice to a designer on how to be stronger in the industry and, a better partner?
Yeah. So I would say, as a designer, again, kind of back to what I was saying earlier, it's great to have vision. It's great to be creative. But you really have to balance it with the business side. And although you will probably have business partners if you are also lucky, and they will give you all the information you need. But as a designer, knowing yourself is really key. So you want to know, I created a collection and it's, the purple collection and everything is purple. But if you're looking at forecast trends and are like, everyone hates purple. Like, everything should be yellow, and then maybe, as a designer, you're like, okay, maybe I'm gonna infuse some yellow into that. Like, it'll be a purple and yellow collection. So really knowing your business and understanding how to get your vision across, but also how to make money. Because you can be an amazing designer, but if you make no money, you really can't have a job. You won't
Yeah.
have a business.
Yeah. Great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
That's awesome. I would love to open it up to you guys. Any questions out there? Looks like we've got our wireless mic, so that's good. If anyone wants, on this side wants to start, pass. Thank you. Okay, that's
Okay.
fine.
You probably touched on this subject, but as fashion evolves, do you think eyewear will continue to be relevant in future trends, or would it be obsolete?
Oh, I definitely think it'll be relevant because the great thing about eyewear, designer eyewear, it is the entry price point into the designer world. So if you can't afford a designer handbag, you can't afford designer ready to wear, usually you're buying a sunglass, maybe a sneaker, but even sneakers are really expensive now. Or not sneakers, shoes are really expensive. Sneaker, everyone says,
Yeah.
everyone's wearing sneakers these days. So yeah, I definitely think it'll continue to be relevant. I think that what eyewear does that the other categories can't do is they really have a much broader reach. So, I sell to stores that Gucci would never step foot in, who, shall remain nameless, but some of them are all in this sort of Midwest area.
Yeah.
So I kind of have that flexibility, right? Because it's eyewear. So I can sell to the department store in the Midwest that Gucci would probably no clue even exist, but it's because I have a much broader base. And so customers they're like, well, I have a piece of Gucci, I have a piece of Balenciaga. So I definitely think that eyewear is something that will continue.
Thank you.
How much of your business is sunglass and how much is eyeglass?
Optical.
Optical.
So my particular business, department stores, my channel is like 95%,
Oh.
98% sun.
Yeah.
But actually there is a whole other channel, which I don't oversee, which is optical, which is
Okay.
actually the bulk of our business.
Oh, wow.
So my channel's they're 4 channels, I'm probably third in terms of volume.
Uh-huh.
It's all sun.
Yeah.
But optical, so think of Cohen's Optical, Lens Crafters, even Costco, Kaiser, which is a hospital. You can buy a designer optical sunglass at pretty much
Anywhere.
optical, your local neighborhood optical store.
Yeah.
So that business is actually much bigger than mine, but that business is less about the fashion.
Uh-huh.
So my business, although the volume is smaller, it's more about the image.
Got it.
So when we have conversations with the brands, when, Alexander McQueen asks us about our business, they're really talking about your business with Bloomingdale's, Nordstrom, Saks. They're not talking about the business with Cohen's Optical.
Right.
They don't even know that exists, quite honestly.
Yeah.
But in terms of volume, that is actually a much bigger business.
Much bigger business. Sells itself. It was interesting. Last spring, I had someone from Warby Parker, and she was saying that they had really benefited through the pandemic because they were from the waist up, and they were on Zoom. So people were upgrading their eyeglasses all through the pandemic because you could see that.
Yeah.
Probably not so much with sunglasses. I mean, it'd be a little funny if people were wearing sunglasses on Zoom calls, but
Well, it's funny.
Sometimes.
We didn't really see, after the first, 2-3 months where we definitely had saw a dip, it kind of came back. And I don't know if I still don't know why, because I actually thought the mask thing was going to kill sunglasses. Because personally, I hate wearing a sunglass with
totally.
masks.
They fog right up, and
They fog
yeah.
up. I feel like I look like I'm going to rob a bank. I'm like, I don't know what this look is. But actually no one else cared. I think
Yeah.
I'm the only person that, people were buying sunglasses even when we were still in the summer of whatever 2020, we
Yeah.
were still very much in the pandemic. I'm like, where are people going? In
But
the
you know what? People were
sunglasses?
spending more time outside, too.
They were
Because of,
because they had to.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So instead of buying a new designer outfit or bag, they're like, let me just buy this sunglass.
Yeah.
I don't know. I
That's
don't know if
great.
people like the anonymity of the sunglass and the mask.
Yeah.
I just thought I looked crazy, but nobody else cared. So it worked for my business.
Yeah, that's great. Who's next?
I have it over here.
Awesome.
You answered a lot of my questions already, so I guess what's some advice that you would give a fashion marketing student or like any student that's about to graduate college in a month?
About to graduate college, you said?
Yeah, like any advice entering the industry.
In the industry, I think internships are great, great, and I think take advantage of the internships. Ask questions, be inquisitive. I mean, no one really as an intern, no one's really expecting an intern to be like changing the game or like changing the business. But when you ask questions and you show that you're really interested and you're passionate, I think it leaves a mark. So even if you find, you know, one person to really like partner up with and really learn and show your interest, I think it really makes a difference in terms of your internship. Because many internships can lead to jobs. If it's not right away, maybe it's in a couple months, keep in touch with people, never burn your bridges. You can interview with someone, or you can get a job and have a boss that you absolutely hate, and you have to kind of smile and deal with it, because the boss that you hate, or I don't want to say the boss, the coworker that you hate could be your boss next year.
Yeah.
So never burn your bridges. This industry is really, really small. I know I said that before, but it is super small, and I've crossed paths with many people twice over, and I'm glad that at least I'm leaving good impressions. People also talk too, I will say that. So whenever I'm hiring someone, you know, you get someone's resume, it comes across your desk, you're like, oh, okay, this person worked at, you know, these 3 companies. It's a 75% chance that I'm going to know somebody at one of those companies, and I'm going to call that person.
Yeah.
And say, oh, hey, someone has just applied for this job. They worked at this company last year. Did you know them? And that person usually says, yes, I knew them, or no, I didn't, but let me ask the person on that team and find out.
Right.
And that could be all in a text thread.
Yeah.
And that one text thread could come back, oh, yeah, they were great, but they left early every day, or they never finished their work, or it could be something very quick, and it cuts the person out.
Yeah.
And it seems unfair, but it's a small industry.
Right.
And it's highly competitive.
Yeah.
So you always want to leave a good impression. If they say, oh, she was an intern, I never saw her, but she was always asking questions, that's actually like great.
Yeah.
Okay, they asked questions, they were interested.
That's great, yeah. And I also feel like there were so many times where I couldn't hire an intern myself, but then a friend would be like, do you have any
Yep.
do you have any sales assistant ideas for me, or whoever, you know, design
Yeah.
assistants? And I'd be like, oh, check this person out.
At least
And
once
pass
a
it
month,
along.
I get a request from somebody. I'm looking for an assistant buyer. I'm looking for an account exec. I'm looking for someone in planning. Do you know anyone?
Yeah,
So, yeah, absolutely.
yeah, that's great. Thanks, good question.
I wanted to ask you, like, who's your biggest competitor and what makes Caring, like, stand out from them?
Yeah. So in eyewear, I think right now our biggest competitor is Telios, and they are the LVMH version of Caring Eyewear. So they have Celine, Dior, all of the LVMH brands. Outside of LV themselves, I guess they're kind of, you know, protected internally, as with all LV things. So right now, they would probably be our biggest competitor. Tom Ford's actually a pretty big competitor too, probably more on the men's side a little bit. I think what makes Caring stand out is the diversity of our brand portfolio, right? So I love Celine. I think Celine is an amazing brand. I was the handbag buyer for Celine for many, many years. I personally love it. If I could wear Celine and not, you know, if I didn't work for Caring, I'd wear Celine if I could. But I think that it's a little one note, you know, looking at the eyewear specifically. When I go out and I do competitive shopping, I'm like, yeah, there's a wall of Celine, but it all kind of looks the same. So I think with Caring, the diversity of our portfolio, like even just looking at Gucci, Gucci spans from super core basic, opening price point, to crazy fashion for like over, you know, $1,200 and everything in between. And I don't see that coming out of like a Celine or even really a Dior. So while I respect those brands and I think they're amazing and great, I think when you look at our portfolio, it's definitely much more diverse. Then you have hype brands like Balenciaga and Bottega, right? Like everybody wants a piece of that right now. Then you have sort of more emerging eyewear brands like Alexander McQueen. Like it's a gorgeous fashion house, but people don't know the eyewear as well as they know maybe some of the other categories. So there's opportunity there.
So I definitely feel like, and then you have Saint Laurent, which is like, super sleek, super edgy, super sexy in terms of the total brand. And so I don't think that Telios has that breadth of diversity at this point if I look at it.
Thank you.
Down here, I think.
Can I go or Tash?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry.
Hi.
My question is the eyewear industry more competitive than the clothing industry, and if so, how?
So I would say yes in general, but it depends on what clothing category you're talking about, right? So eyewear is probably the same level of competitive as denim. So again, I worked in denim for many years. There's constantly some new denim brand popping up every single season, because if you think about it, denim is kind of easy to make in terms of production. It's cotton, it's water, it's the same wash cycle, it's the same. It's literally the same materials. Just like eyewear, it's plastic and metal.
Yeah.
Whereas other categories, like if you're talking about ready to wear, like it could be whatever you're making for the season. So that could be a little more competitive in terms of there's not as many players out there. But in general, if I just compare clothing to eyewear, I think eyewear is more competitive because you don't just have the designer space, you also have non-designer high-end brands. So you have like Oliver Peoples, which is a big player, and they're under the Luxottica umbrella. You have Chanel, so you have your designer. And then you have even like Ray-Ban, the Ray-Bans of the world. Now, we don't see them as our competitors because it's a much different price point, but I mean, technically, if you walk into a Nordstrom, you're looking at, they offer it all. They offer everything from Ray-Ban up to Chanel.
Yeah.
So it is a competitor in that sense. So I would say eyewear is a pretty competitive market. Mm-hmm.
Hi. I was wondering how the sales strategies vary between all the different brands under Caring, and what factors kind of determine how you're strategizing.
Yeah. So in terms of sales strategies, they're all the same in that they all want more sales every year. So like that screen you were showing, and they're like down to plan and down to last year. I'm like, this is going out of business, whatever this brand is. Like they're done.
Yeah.
Our numbers could never look like that. So everyone's always looking to gain to last year. And in the case of COVID, it was LLY, so it's another term, it's last year. So we weren't looking at 2020 as a benchmark because it was the worst year ever. Everyone was looking at 2019 and getting back to those numbers. So all the brands are looking to grow. Now the growth is looked at based on a percentage to LY, right? Every brand has different numbers, right? So if Gucci, and I'm totally making up these numbers, if Gucci's $1 billion, and Chloe's 500,000, it's not comparable in terms of dollar volume, but it may be comparable in terms of trends to last year. So if Chloe is up 65% and Gucci's only at 5%, like Chloe's doing pretty good, like compared to Gucci from that perspective. They're never gonna, not never, but they're not gonna compare in terms of volume. So in terms of sales trend, we have forecasts, which are basically our plans. And we're always looking, and they're annual, so we're always looking to achieve those forecasts every year for every brand, and we break it down by brand. And a lot goes into that. It's not just my decision. I kind of, give a first pass. It goes through my boss, it goes through our headquarters, it goes through the brand, and then comes back to me. I might call out some things, and then everyone kind of signs off on it. So it's really different by brand. I will say, the more emerging brands probably have more pressure. So like an Alexander McQueen, a Bottega, Balenciaga, because not that there's no more growth for a Gucci, but it's kind of, I don't want to say plateaued, but you're not going to get as much growth out of a Gucci that's already massively distributed. Like I don't really have any new stores to open for Gucci, as I am going to get out of Balenciaga that's still sort of up and coming in a way.
Yeah.
I don't know if that answered your question. But.
Yeah, it did. Thank you.
Okay.
Hi, thank
Hi.
you for being here.
Oh, you're welcome.
I was just wondering if there's been a point in your career where you felt like you are meant to do this, like you love what you do, or has there been a rewarding experience that stands out?
Yeah. So I've had both. I've had moments where I'm like, I'm meant to do this, and I have moments where I'm like, this is not for me. I think early on in my career, when I got my job at Barney's, like that was the epitome to me. I was like so excited. I literally remember stepping outside of the Saks buying office and calling my mom and being like, I got the job. Like I was so excited. So working there was really great. Not all the years I was there, but you know, the beginning half, it was really great. Being in that buying office, going to all these new designers, really feeling like I was making an impact and learning. And then the other time I think is when I, you know, in this role a lot, I've had a lot of moments where I'm like, wow, I never thought I wanted to move to sales. I never had any interest in sales ever. I don't know why. I didn't hate it. I was just like, I work in buying and I'm a buyer and that's what I do. But now being on the side, there are definitely moments where, you know, I'm strategizing about the brands and thinking about new ways to build the business, and I'm really able and have the freedom to think out of the box and try different things. And I feel like my boss really allows me to do that, and it's a good feeling, and it feels like this is what I was meant to be doing. And then I think even this opportunity just in the past few years with D&I and the Black ERG, like that's really been something that's more of a personal passion. To be able to be given the platform to do that feels really good, and it really feels like a nice added part to my job. Because there was a point where, I'll tell you the story, but I used to go to Europe, like I said, 4 times a year. So I'd be in my hotel room, and the television, everything is in Paris was in French, and I speak no French, except for CNN or CNBC. So I'd have to watch CNN every morning. And, you know, world news is pretty depressing. Like, you'd watch world news, there's wars going on everywhere. And I'd watch that in the morning before I went to, like, a market appointment. And I just felt like, what am I doing with my life? Like, I'm not saving anyone's life. I'm buying $3,000 handbags. Like, I just felt kind of, like, lame, honestly. And I felt like I still want to do this, but I want to do a little bit more. I'd like to do something that means something. And so this ERG actually really means something to me. Like creating this opportunity really means something. It is a passion for me. So I think moments like that really help me keep going, because there are moments where I'm like, I'm selling $500 sunglasses. Like there are so many bigger issues in the world.
Yeah.
But this is my job and I do love it. So, you know, having things like that really help.
That's great.
Mm-hmm.
Right behind you.
Hi, I wanted to know, did you look for any specific elements while buying designer handbags at Barney's?
I'm sorry, say it again, specific?
Did you look for any specific elements while buying designer handbags at Barney's?
Oh, did I look at any specific elements when looking at buying handbags?
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So handbags are not as technical as denim, but there's, you know, materials, there's different types of leathers, there's different rivets, different zipper designs. So when I was buying handbags, I mean, it was for a few years, so different trends happened, but the trend that I remember the most was like crossbody and mini bags. Like bags kept getting smaller and smaller and smaller to the point where they were like those little Giacomo bags that are like, you can fit like a lipstick case in. And at that point I was like, I'm done. I can't with this trend anymore. But you're always looking for quality and craftsmanship. At least this is specific to Barney's, right? Like every retailer is gonna have a different focus. But for Barney's, it was about quality, craftsmanship, and the story behind the brand. Because we were always trying to tell a story. So we would love when the designer would come out and tell us, why did they create this bag line? Why did they name this bag? Why did they design the zipper this way? Why are they producing out of this manufacturer? Whatever that was that told the story behind the brand was super important for Barney's. So that's always what we were looking for, attention to detail, and then something different, right? Like if you already have a store full of totes, I don't need to pick up another line that offers me totes. Now, while it may be important to have totes because that's a key classification in handbags, it may not be the thing you want to lead with. Like, what makes you different? What makes you stand out? And the thing with bags is, quite honestly, it's easy in the sense of you only need one bag, right? Like, most brands, if you think about it, there's one bag that you see. They have a whole collection behind that not that many people are buying, but there's 1 to 2 bags that really put them on the map. And that's kind of all you need. And then you kind of develop that. You make different sizes, you make different, one's crossbody, one's a short strap, different colors, different materials, and you like run with it. And you can really build a business that way.
Hi, I was just wondering if retail buying strategies are very different from wholesale buying strategies, and if so, how?
Yeah, so retail, you said retail buying different than wholesale buying strategies? Yeah, so retail buying is all about looking at those sales reports and making those decisions. You're like, vests are selling. I need to go out to all of my brands and buy as many vests as I can because vests are trending right now. So your strategies are based on what's selling, what the sell out is, what's selling to the end consumer. On the wholesale side, while you're not buying, I will say your decisions should be based on that a lot too. So I look at those same compiled selling reports that I get from my accounts, and when I'm forecasting, so I'm even more in advance. If buyers are buying 4 to 6 months in advance, I'm placing forecast and production units, I don't know, 6 to 8 to 10 months in advance. Like right now, next week I'm gonna see Chloe Spring Summer 23, which we're in Spring Summer 22, so I'm a year ahead, right? And I have to forecast for that. I have to tell my planners, I want 1,000 units of this sunglass in 2023. But I'm using those tools, those same tools that the buyers are using to make those decisions. So it's the same in a way. Really, you're making your decisions based on the analysis. And then based on your own, knowledge. Like I know that acetate frames sell better than metal. So I'm not gonna go and pick a bunch of metal frames to show for Spring Summer 23. Unless something changes and it's the best metal I've ever seen, but like it would be a risk without any analysis behind it.
Thank you.
You might have touched on this a little bit, but do you feel like there's any creativity within your position, or it's more so directly based on numbers and data?
So I would say there's more creativity on the buying side. So it's probably, the buying side is more 50-50. 50% numbers, 50% creativity, because you're actually
That's great.
writing orders and placing buys and making decisions based on either a color story or what's trending. On my side, there's a bit of creativity, but it's more working when I'm talking about forecasting units in production. So what I was saying, I'm seeing Chloe Spring Summer 23 next week. So I put on my creative hat and I'm like, all right, what do I need from Chloe? Chloe sells neutral tones, so I need to see a bunch of neutral tones, or I can give a little bit of creative direction. I'm not the designer at all, but like I can give some creative direction and input. And then also when we're doing we call it strike, which is like the process where you select your assortment, right? So Gucci will put out, I'm making up numbers again, 1,000 units for Fall Winter 22 collection. I'm not showing 1,000 different styles to my accounts. I might show them 800. So I'm picking what 800 are the best to show to my customers. And I'm doing that using a sort of a creative, I'm creating a collection in a way. I'm like, okay, I want all the like red sunglasses to come in this delivery because it shows a story, and like, red is a hot color coming up, and I'm totally making these things up, but so don't everybody go out and do anything with red. But red is a hot color and it's on trend, and I really want to show red first in the first delivery, and then I'm gonna put this other color in the second delivery. So that's sort of the creative freedom that I have. For you all on the design side, it'll be like the complete opposite. It'll be like 80 to 90% creative, I would think, and the rest is kind of numbers. I don't have much of a creative. I always say I was the perfect buyer because I can do the numbers up so far, and I'm not a planner, so that's where my brain cuts off. And I can do the creative up to so far, but I'm not a designer, so that's where my brain kind of cuts off. Hi. Yeah. That would depend on the brand. But I think from the brand's perspective and the sales perspective, we want you to lose them so you can buy a new pair. But some brands do have a warranty, but for loss, no. It's like damage. Like, and it's more like, not like you broke them, like it was a defect or something. But it will depend on the brand. It's better for us for you
Add
to
it
buy
to your
another
renter's
pair.
insurance.
Yeah, add it, exactly, add it to your renter's insurance.
I think the mic is off. If it's you, flick it up.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Did you find it difficult to move up at the companies that you worked at?
So I will say at Barney's, in the beginning, no. Towards the end, yes, because I kind of just hit like the higher up you go, the less jobs there are. So I kind of hit a point where it was like, well, you know, unless this person literally dies, I'm never going to get their job. I mean, it just kind of, that's, I think, every organization for the most part. So I kind of hit a bit of a wall there. I was also there for 12 years, and like that was a very long time. But I did move up, you know, I mean, I went from associate buyer to senior buyer for a long, long time in another role, and then like buying director. But that was over the course of 12 years, so not ideal for most people. And then at Saks, I do feel like, I mean, I went from executive trainee to I went into planning for like 6 months, and then I went into an assistant buyer role. I think I was an assistant buyer twice in 2 different roles, I can't remember. But for the most part, there's just upward mobility. It really just depends on the company, though. I think at Kering, because it's such a big global organization, there's a lot of mobility opportunities. Barney's was actually a pretty small company internally, so there wasn't a ton of mobility. But that's just specific to the company.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hi.
Hi.
Sorry. You touched on this a little earlier, but how do you work with designers day to day at Kering or in your previous jobs? Like, how involved are you in the design process?
So not, right now, my current role, not very involved, just kind of like what I said, where they will send, you know, kind of prototypes or images or CADs of a collection that's being developed, and then I can kind of give a little input from my specific accounts. On the flip side, when I was at Barney's, and again, I think this was specific to Barney's because I worked with a lot of up-and-coming designers, that's what they were known for, I was able to give a lot of input. So if it was a small up-and-coming denim brand or contemporary brand, I could go in and say, this line is great, but what I think you need to add is we need, you know, at that point it was skinny jeans. We need a skinny jean. Like, we need a distressed jean. This is what's working for us. This is what's trending. Add this to the line, and like it will be great. So I had a lot of, and I think people really, you know, they took it to heart and they would actually make the changes. So if you're honestly a good buyer and you really do want to work with the brand, it only behooves both of you to give them some feedback on like what is actually selling and what is trending. So from that role, I did have a lot of input and work very closely with designers or whatever it may be, the sales team, to give some creative input.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, my question is, how does Kering Eyewear work with luxury brands and to make sure that the product you'll deliver match the brand identity?
Yeah, that's actually a good question. So Kering Eyewear has designers based in Italy. And so those designers, and I'm kind of making some of this up because I don't know the exact process, but I'm imagining that those designers get some kind of creative direction from the brand, whether it's Balenciaga and they are like, okay, well, Balenciaga next season is going to have, you know, all these crazy alien shapes. And like, that's what they're going to do. So you need to make alien shaped sunglasses. Or this is the color. This is the color that we're going to infuse in the collection. So you need to have this infused into the eyewear. So there's definitely a connection. Everything does have to be signed off by the brand. I do know that. So while we have our own design team, all of that goes to the brand, and those creative designers, honestly, for all of our brands, are very particular. So if it's not signed off by the creative designer or director, then it will never see it. So there is definitely an alignment with the brand.
Okay, thank you. And so one more question is
Yeah.
about your, like, so far your career. Have you ever made any like mistakes or wrong decision, and what did you learn?
I'm
from
sorry,
it?
wait, say it again.
Like so far from your whole career, have you ever made any like wrong decision or mistakes? And
Oh my
did
God,
you
yeah.
learn something
She's perfect.
from?
She's never made a
Oh
mistake.
my God, yeah, I made so many mistakes. I don't have a crystal ball. I have no idea what is going to sell. I've purchased many things that I'm like, this is going to be amazing. And then I get that report and I'm like, oh my God, it had a 2% sell through. It is awful. Countless things. I can't even name one. But that's also a part of being a smart business manager, right? Like you're going to buy things that don't work. How do you improve your numbers to make it work? Do I need to mark it down? Do I need to ask the vendor for markdown assistance? Do I need to send it back? Do I need to negotiate some kind of swap into things that are working? There are different ways that you can manipulate your business. So it's not necessarily about the mistake you're making, it's about how are you improving that mistake. I've definitely made mistakes, yes, for sure. I mean, everyone does. You kind of have to learn the job.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Straight across, there's some, yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
So going off of what you kind of just talked about with like working with smaller brands, what advice would you have for small businesses or fashion startups looking to enter into the luxury market?
So luxury is tough to get into, I will say, only because I feel like there's a monopoly out of Europe. I mean, there's not any really designer American brand that people would, I don't want to knock any American brands, but that people recognize in that same way. So I can't even say luxury specifically is tough. I don't even have the answer on how to get into that. There are a lot of old heritage houses that have been around since the 1800s or whatever, and I don't know what deems them luxury or not, but we all call them luxury. Just in terms of getting into the business as a designer, I would say actually mentor two girls who started a handbag line, and they are Parsons graduates actually, and they I've given them a lot of advice in terms of how to like get their business up and running. They did start as a D2C, so direct to consumer. I think that's great for a small business, quite honestly. I mean, I'm in the obviously traditional wholesale retail side, so not knocking that, but I think if you're an up and coming business, you're trying to figure out who your customer is, you really want to get like direct feedback from the end consumer. If you can do a direct to consumer business, I think it is great. You're kind of cutting out the middleman essentially, and you're getting all the profits. I don't know what all that entails, to be honest, but I think it's a great way to go to start a business. I think getting some sort of consultant on the business side, because I do know that as designers, you fully get the creative side, but sometimes you're not as attuned to the business side. So if you have a business partner who can say, all right, this material is costing us X amount per yard, you could really do the same thing for this material. Or if you don't want to cut costs in material, maybe you cut costs in shipping, whatever it is. Someone with the business mind that's like looking at the numbers and trying to make you as profitable as possible. And then kind of once you've launched, and obviously, social media is like kind of how everything gets on the map now, which you guys are very lucky because I didn't grow up in an age of social media. So the fact that you can become Instagram famous still blows my mind. Not just a person, but actually brands. So use that to your benefit. As far as I know, Instagram costs nothing right now, but I'm sure they'll start getting their money. I know they ads and things like that, but if you can use it to your advantage now, I think that is definitely the way to go. And then eventually you can also work with a showroom if you want to have a vendor that represents you. If you're a smaller company, that always works if you go into like a multi-branded showroom. Obviously one that's aligned with your aesthetic and your business and kind of the clients that you're looking to catch or to capture. I mean, there's a lot of different ways, but that's what I would suggest if it was me starting a small business right now, today.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Hi. What do you think of the anti-capitalism movement currently, especially in Gen Z, and how it affects retail?
I don't know if I have thoughts on that.
Yeah.
That's a hard one. I'm sorry.
My next question would be, I used to live in the Bay
You're throwing me
Area.
hard questions now, and I can't even see you, sorry.
Sorry, the lights are kind of
very bright.
Right.
I used to live in the Bay, and what do you miss the most about the Bay?
Oh, that's an easy one. Why didn't you start with that one? I miss everything. My whole family is there. So I'm here, my husband's family's here, but my entire family's all in Oakland. So
Oh, wow.
I miss them dearly, and I try to go back at least twice a year or have them come here. But I miss everything about it. I love New York and I love Brooklyn. My adult life has been here, and it's great. But there are times when I just want to go home and live like a normal life and have a driveway and like go to Target and park in the lot and the easy things, I guess, the non-New York City life.
Yeah.
Hi. So I wanted to ask you, like, as a new brand, when you come up in the market, what is it that you would look for in new talent? Like, how do we stand out to buyers?
Okay, wait, where are you? Because I can't even see. Oh,
She's-
there you are. Okay,
Yeah.
sorry. I was like, who am I answering? Okay, how would you stand out to buyers? Okay, so this is kind of what I was saying about being different. So if you are developing handbags, we'll go back to that. Know who your competitors are and who you want to sit next to on the floor. And then how are you going to stand out differently from them, right? So if you want to sit next to the Celines and the Louis Vuitton and the Fendis of the world, what's making them great? How can you incorporate that into your brand? And then how can you stand out? So it's kind of, it's not a one answer thing. It's like you have to be very aware of the competitive market because there's always competitors in every category. Who you see as your close competitors and what makes you stand out. Because as a buyer, when I would walk into any showroom and seeing any new brand, no matter what the category, I always would ask either the salesperson or the designer that, who are your closest competitors? And you have to be realistic about that, right? Because I think a lot of brands just wanted to be in Barney's just to be in Barney's. They're like, oh my God, I just want to be in Barney's. It's my life stream to be in Barney's. And they're showing me a handbag collection that is like $25 a bag. And I'm like, well, this is really like more of a Target, which is fine. Target's a great retailer, but like, that's not my price point. So it showed me that that person had no clue about the competitive environment or even what we were selling at Barney's. They just wanted to be in Barney's because that was the name people knew. So doing your research, are your price points aligned with your competitors? Are the materials aligned? Are the designs aligned with that same customer? And then how are you standing out? Because you can't